Hello, everyone. Welcome. As Brian said, my name is Virginia Roach, and I'm the Executive Director at the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our Bright Now speaker series featuring CTY alumna and Global Vice President of Internal and Leadership Communications at the Coca-Cola Company, Karyn Dest Harrington. A California native, Karyn took writing courses at CTY's Hampshire College and Loyola Marymount University campuses in 1993 and 94. She graduated with honors from the University of Missouri of Journalism and earned dual MBA degrees from the Cornell University S.C. Johnson Graduate School of Management and the Queen's University Smith School of Business in Canada. Over the course of her professional career, Karyn has gained an extensive amount of experience in journalism, communications, and public affairs. She led coverage of the 2000 Democratic and Republican national conventions and the Bush versus Gore case from the U.S. Supreme Court. She earned a William Randolph Hearst National Journalism Award for her work before joining the Coca-Cola Company in 2002. Throughout her time at Coca-Cola, Karyn has served as Chief of Staff and worked on a wide variety of special projects, including the Olympic Games in Athens, Greece, and the Olympic Torch Relay in Asia and Australia. Today, Karyn is currently pursuing a master's degree of liberal arts at Johns Hopkins University. In addition to her role at Coca-Cola, she is also an adjunct professor of business communications at the University of Missouri Trulas College of Business. I will now pass it over to today's moderator, CTY's Senior Director of Development and Alumni Relations, Brian Bowles.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Virginia. So Karyn, first, welcome and thank you so much. It's a pleasure having you this evening.
Thank you, Brian. It's great to be here. And thank you, Virginia, for the introduction as well.
So our first question is, I always like to start with just checking on seeing how you and your family are doing. Kind of how have you managed COVID, the pandemic, life in general, but just wanted to ask you about that first.
Yeah, thank you for asking. And I hope you and your family have been managing it okay as well. So my husband works at the CDC here in Atlanta. And so he's been working on COVID since the earliest days. I have two young children, a 5 and 8-year-old. And so we've been through the last couple of years of online school, in school, plus exposures, masks, no masks. So probably like many of you who are on the line, it's been a very adventurous couple of years, but all things considered, we are doing well. So thank you for asking.
Absolutely, absolutely. So a question I always love to ask in our kind of 40+ year history of CTY is, how did you or your parents learn about CTY?
Very slowly, as the case was. I remember taking our normal state testing, like I'm sure many of your students do today. And several of us got a letter about an invitation to take the SAT. And so we all thought that would be fun, I suppose. And so we took the SAT, and I remember there was no pressure. We didn't do any test prep. We just showed up on a Saturday, took the SAT. And a few weeks later, this invitation came from CTY, and we learned more about it, and it sounded amazing. And I know we'll talk more about the experience, but just a life-changing experience going to CTY, going to the programs, and being part of the Johns Hopkins CTY network.
So with that, I'd love just to ask the question, could you tell me a little bit about your folks? I know when we first talked, you talked about your father being a judge and just the commitment and sacrifice to get you into CTY. But just share a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, so as Virginia mentioned, I'm originally from California. And so we were looking at trying to figure out which campus, whether it was Johns Hopkins directly or one of the other campuses, and trying to figure out how to afford the combination of tuition and airfare. And so my dad had saved, had one of those credit cards that had a lot of airline miles. And so that's how we were able to make the airlines work the first year. So I remember flying across the country, my first time on my own flying across the country. It was a red-eye flight. got there, found a payphone to call home, right? Let the parents
Yes.
know we're okay. And so, so that was the first summer. And then the second summer, we really focused on staying closer to home. So I went to one of the LA campuses because that actually was much more affordable too, not having to deal with airfare. So, really credit my mom and dad for one, is they got this letter in the mail from CTY, really trying to understand it and being supportive and realizing it could be a great experience. So very grateful for their part. And I know we have some parents on the line today, so please know how you help your kids through this experience is a really important part of how they'll do in the program.
Absolutely. If we have any young people joining us, we'll have to explain what the payphone was.
Right. Right.
So tell me a little bit about what you were like as a kid, from what you remember.
Oh gosh. Well, so you'd given me a heads up you might ask about this. So I hope it's okay. I put a little slide together. So Stacy, feel free to pull the slide up. So thinking about CTY, I went, dug through all the old storage boxes and found a couple of CTY items. So what you'll see on the upper left is our CTY yearbook, summer book, whatever you might call it, from 93. And then the other is a screenshot of our t-shirt, because there's always a t-shirt, right, from 94. Yes. And so if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, first of all, you can tell my age because I'm old enough that the yearbook was black and white paper copies for everyone. So this is actually what it looks like. But so I'm on the right in the photo, and then our residential advisor, who I got back in touch with as a result of the conversations we've been having the last few days, Brian, actually drew all of this. And so I'm the caricature on the left. And see, what you can see is I have a microphone because I knew I wanted to be a broadcast reporter. And I've got like a newspaper in my other hand and some pens and paper near me. And I wore glasses a lot at the time. So she has me in my glasses for that. But yeah, so, I loved to learn. That's something that's probably always been a part of my experience. And just really had a great time at CTY. So a little glimpse into the past.
Indeed. And a great segue to our next question. How do you feel like your education supported your career interests?
It was essential. Well, education obviously is essential in terms of the career path that I've chosen, but specifically in terms of CTY, it came at a critical time for me. I think for a lot of kids, especially, kids who are able to do a lot of different subject areas well in school, middle school, high school is when you start to really realize where are your strengths. And so for me, CTY came at a time when I was just learning that writing and communications was potentially one of my strengths. And so, for example, the first year at CTY, one of the works we did throughout the summer, I continued to refine when I went home. And because of that, I was able to enter it into a writing competition and win the writing competition. And so it was able to boost my confidence and opportunities for me in the writing space. So like I said, for me, it really came at a critical time and enabled me to really deepen my skills.
Do you remember what that writing piece was about, or the topic or title of it? Anything?
Yeah, it was looking at, gosh, you're putting me on the spot, Brian, to look at almost 30 years now. But it was looking at sort of the dynamics of a family from the mother's perspective. So that was kind of what it was about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So next question is kind of share with us a little bit about your career path and kind of what led you to your current position at Coca-Cola.
Yeah. So I had always wanted to be a reporter, right? You saw the little picture of me with my microphone and newspaper. And so from the time I was 7 years old onwards, I wanted to be in the White House press corps. And so everything for me really related to how can I advance that goal. And so I went to the University of Missouri School of Journalism. While there, I worked for NBC affiliates. I worked on our Capitol Bureau, and I never once thought about doing anything other than journalism. Somewhere along the way, I had earned a scholarship from Coca-Cola. And if I may, because I know we do have students and parents online. There's a Coca-Cola Scholars Foundation scholarship. I applied for it. The only condition of keeping the scholarship once you earn it is that you stay in touch. And so after I graduated from Mizzou and I was working as a reporter in an NBC affiliate, an email came in that the Coca-Cola company was looking for a past Coke scholar to come in for 1 year in the corporate communications team. And so I thought, well, 1 year in corporate communications sounds great. And then I can go back to journalism. Well, that was 20 years ago. And so, but what I found when I came to Coke is just a world of opportunity opened for me. And so I've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different areas: media relations, employee communications, government relations. And so what I've really enjoyed about the Coca-Cola career is I've been able to work with just wonderful people all around the world and get to try lots of different areas over those 20 years. So that's how I got to Coca-Cola, was through a scholarship program that probably I earned in part because of being part of CTY.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. And just a reminder to our guests, please submit your questions using the Q&A. We'll designate a portion where we will take some of those questions from our audience. So tell me a little bit about your kind of current job responsibilities and what that entails. The title itself is just, it gravitates to me. It sounds, very, it's a big title, I'll say. But tell me a little bit about what that job entails.
I think the most important part of my job is that I'm able to connect what the company's trying to do with our employees. So my job has a few different components, but if I had to boil it down, part of it is communicating with employees about what the company's doing. And when you think about the last couple of years in particular, communicating how we keep our employees safe, what the company's doing to grow, to innovate, how the company's working to make a difference in the world. That's a pretty special thing to get to do. And the other part of my role is working with our executives to help communicate those messages, both internally to our employees and to the outside world. So that it's a really fun role in that I get to, connect the wonderful things that the company does with our stakeholders, starting with our employees.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a role that actually helps to enhance culture and develop culture within, particularly how those messages are sent throughout.
Absolutely.
What would you say some of the most important skill sets are for a young person that maybe aspires to be in this industry, in your industry?
Yeah. So writing skills are essential. But what I would say is understand the strategy behind what you're trying to write, because my guess is that whatever tools, platforms exist 10, 20 years from now, whenever you may be in the workforce, might be quite different, right? So Facebook, Twitter, internal channels like Yammer, Slack, whatever, none of those existed when I started at Coke. So I've had to learn, different types of writing styles for different types of platforms. So I think understanding how to write well is important, but also understanding how do you learn and adapt with digital fluency is essential, because the one thing I will tell you is that whatever skills you build today, you will need to build and change and grow those skills over time as well.
And your pursuit of the master's degree at Hopkins is evident in that you continue to grow and develop.
Absolutely. I learned how to do some, I would say, limited scale animations through my Hopkins program, and some other things that just because it was a safe space to try new types of skills.
Definitely, definitely. So what are some of the challenges that one may face in the industry?
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned to you that there's been a lot of focus on communications the last couple of years, and that's wonderful. And that also can be a challenge, right? Because I think we've all seen what companies say, what employees expect of their companies has all really been evolving. And so I think one of the challenges is just making sure you're staying current and that you are, maintaining authenticity and sincerity in those messages that come out from the company, from the leaders, and amongst each other as employees.
So thinking of kind of career journey and progression, I'd like to just ask a little bit about mentorship. and the role mentorship has played in your career?
It's been really important. And I think it's taken on different forms. You know, you have heard through the years, you can have mentors, you can have advocates, you can have coaches. And so I think, first of all, understanding who your mentors are is important, but also understanding kind of that chorus of people around you that can help you in your career. So, you know, a mentor is somebody who's really, investing in you and helping you along the way. An advocate might be somebody who's quite literally advocating for you at the table. They may not be mentoring you day to day, but they're advocating, they're sponsoring you. And a coach is somebody who might, work with you to really help hone your skills, your behaviors, whatever it can be helpful to you in growing as a leader. And so I think from a mentorship standpoint, I've seen it in a couple of ways. One is as mentors have poured into me, and I've been really grateful for that. I think one of the ways I've used mentors is to get their feedback and understand how I can sort of grow. In fact, that's one of the things that led me to get my MBA was feedback from a mentor. And then mentoring is important. So I just spent the last year in a program that's it's company to company. It's designed to help grow women leaders and board leaders. And so I spent a year mentoring a rising star at a bank in Australia, and mentoring her as she's making critical decisions in her career. So I think the awesome thing about mentoring is what it can do for you, and then also what you can give back. And then I would say this for a lot of our younger alumni on the phone, in the video is that one of the things increasingly we're seeing the value of is reverse mentoring, where maybe somebody who's earlier in their career mentors somebody who's later in their career. So there are lots of different takes on mentoring, but it's definitely something everyone should find the right way to place in their lives.
Well, that reverse mentoring kind of ties into the next question of kind of how has the industry changed since you started your career to kind of now at Coke. You alluded to like the different platforms and just how things consistently evolve. But how has it changed since through your time and through your career?
Yeah, I think that the changes in a couple of different dimensions. I think technology has changed everything. And that's probably true of just about every industry, right? I mean, when I started at Coke and was pulling news clips together, it was all very physical papers, walking them around. Now, of course, all of that is quite digitized. I think the more, strategic difference that I've seen beyond the technology changes are that in the area of public affairs and communications, which is my lane of work overall, historically, it was probably pretty siloed for the most part. So if you started in media relations as a coordinator, like I did, you'd then be a manager and then a senior manager and a director and so on. And I actually got to be part of a pilot almost, 18 years ago or so that looked at, well, what if we shuffled those lines a little bit? And so I went from media relations to government relations and lobbying, which I hadn't done before. I didn't know how to do it. And I'm very grateful to the leaders at the time who invested their time to teach me and help me grow in that area. So I think one of the strategic changes has just been that you can move across the lanes in a way that maybe wasn't as viable when I first started.
Definitely. And if you could share, I guess my next question is kind of, and you answered this a bit, but kind of what motivated that decision, but kind of take us a little bit into that kind of conversation with your mentor around pursuing your MBA and just continuing to climb in that educational ladder.
So one of my best experiences in my career was a job I didn't get. And so it was, I was up for a role that would have been a deputy chief of staff to our CEO at the time. This was maybe 12 years ago or so. And, the chief of staff at the time called me to say I didn't get the job, but he made this critical offer. He said, would you like to grab some coffee? And I'm happy to share with you sort of, kind of some of the feedback out of the process. And so I took him up on that. And so when we sat together, one of the things that he shared was that, they really needed somebody with stronger, quote unquote, business operational acumen. And so that really sparked the idea of going to get my MBA. And I am not strong at math and quantitative areas. I did not go to CTY math program. So, it was not easy to go and then to try to get to an Ivy League MBA program at that, but it was something that I felt was worth pursuing. The other thing I took out of that was what a good experience you can have when you don't get that thing you want, whether it's a job or whatever. And so, just one small takeaway for me is when I interview people, for at least the finalists, for the people that I don't end up selecting, I always offer them, hey, would you like to chat about your career, chat about, what we saw in the process, where you're strong, where maybe, you could look to grow if you want to continue in this area, any feedback. And so it was really transformational at that moment. But that's the moment that convinced me to go get my MBA. And then down the road, I wanted to try going a little deeper on the liberal arts side. And Hopkins had a wonderful program I could continue to do remotely. And so that's how I got into the Master of Liberal Arts program as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. Kind of what are one or two pieces of advice you would leave kind of our audience members, particularly our younger audience members, about just career journey path, but any advice you would give, maybe one or two pieces that you want to leave behind?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say, and it's going to sound a little odd saying this to a group of highly educated and aspiring to be highly educated CTYers and alums, and from somebody who's working on their third master's, but I think the biggest thing is, what are you going to unlearn? And so we talk about, everybody talks about we're going to learn at this university or this role or whatever. And I think there was a pivotal point about a decade ago when I was coming out of a role, and a lot of the skills and whatnot that made me succeed in that role actually were the skills that were not helpful in the next role. And so one of the things I learned from that is, when you move from role to role, when you move from life stage to life stage, what are those things that you have to actively stop learning or even unlearn? And that is a very hard thing, I think, for a CTYer to do. But that is the biggest advice I can give.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I'm going to take a couple of questions from the audience, but Karyn, thank you for the conversation thus far, and I'm going to feed a few questions that we've gotten from our audience members, and also just offer again the opportunity to submit any questions. We'll try to get to them all, but we have one question. Kind of, what classes would you suggest a young person interested in your field to take?
Yep. So it can certainly vary depending on the expertise, right? So definitely if you want to be in communications, I would say take some communications classes, writing classes, journalism classes. Now, you could, like if you have a passion for healthcare, right? There are programs that are focused on health communications. So you might want to pair that expertise in communications with whatever field. For me, I took a lot of political science classes. I actually got my minor in poli-sci because I knew I wanted to go, at least at that time, I knew I wanted to go into political reporting. So I would say I would make sure you develop the core skills and competencies you need for the area you're going into, as well as sort of the subject matters that would complement and give you some expertise to go into the marketplace with.
Thank you. Here's another one. What do you enjoy most, or what do you love the most about your job at CocaCola?
Oh my gosh, the people. Working, Coke is in pretty much most of the world. There are really only a couple of markets that we don't operate in. And so through the years, I've had an opportunity to work with people in just about every corner of the planet and get to know different cultures. And so I would definitely say the people and the culture is the best part.
If you could go back and do one thing differently in your career, what would that be?
Great question. I think there are two places I would have loved to have gotten more experience if I had known I was going to go into the career lane that I ultimately in the public affairs and communications world. One is either working at an agency. So I think that's where a lot of people that are in this line of work, they usually start off with one of the major public affairs and communications agencies. So that I did a little mini adventure with them when I first started at Coke. I worked with one of them pretty closely as a transition, but that's one critical area. The other, I really love politics. I know it's a difficult time in that space, but I believe in the importance of public service. And so, I would have loved to have done a bit more working on political campaigns. I just, and personally, I love to hire people who have worked in that space, whatever party, it doesn't matter. It's just, I think the skills you learn in that universe are really great for a career in public affairs and communications.
Here's another one. Besides writing, what do you enjoy doing?
Well, first of all, I mean, where I am at this point in my life, the thing I enjoy doing most is being with my family. So I think my husband and kids might even be on the line tonight, but we have certain shows or movies we watch together, and that is the most fun thing that we get to do.
Wonderful. So how do you collect the information for writing, and how do you figure out what you want to write about? There's a question from the audience.
It's a great question. Sometimes it's very process oriented, right? You're trying to execute a certain outcome, right? So therefore so for example, I always start with a communication, my team hears this from me a lot. What's the outcome we're trying to drive? Not how many emails are we trying to get open? Like, what's the outcome we're trying to drive? So once you know what the outcome is, then you can kind of work back from there to figure out the writing. The other thing I would say is, when you're working in communications, there's a lot of art and there's a lot of science. And I had a professor tell me once, with all respect to the CTYers that are in the math and science space, he said, this is actually harder than rocket science because there's a textbook for rocket science. And a lot of times in public affairs and communications, you're choosing between different options and you're assessing risk or you're assessing opportunity, but there's not necessarily one ultimate clear mathematically derived answer. So it can be, like I said, a bit of process and a bit of art.
So here's an interesting question. I'll paraphrase it, but essentially with the trend in kind of changing jobs every 2 to 4 years, kind of generally, what's your perspective knowing that you've been at Coca-Cola for 20 years?
Yeah, so the thing I would tell you first for me is for my career, which has maybe been a little bit unique, is I have changed roles probably every 2 to 4 years, different disciplines. And so, for example, I do a lot of employee communications today, and it was one of the things I thought I never wanted to do until a few years ago. And so, I've had the chance to kind of change every 2 to 4 years. It happens to have been within a Coke context. I would also say for our company in particular, and this may be somewhat unique, but I think the company has evolved tremendously in the last 20 years. It has really transformed into being very growth oriented. And so there's been a lot of great opportunity there. I think you can get great and different experiences within one organization or across organizations. And I've seen lots of great colleagues, leave the company, come back, leave and go on to other things at other organizations. And that's okay too. And so I think one of the benefits of the move to where we are in society is that there's a lot more openness to people coming in and out of organizations and trying new things in their career. Because, like I said, 20 years ago, a career like mine would have been very siloed at a place like Coke. And today I've had a lot of opportunity to move across disciplines.
Here's a really good question, and they're all good. With working from home, online learning, and social media, kids may generally be weaker in both written and verbal communication. How can we encourage and better foster communication skills?
It's a great question. And I can appreciate how difficult the last couple of years have been. What I would also tell you is that the last couple of years have also been a watershed in terms of communicating. It just looks different, right? I mean, you think about it, a lot of the companies, had moved a lot of their data into the cloud, and things that, probably hadn't occurred 10, 20 years ago, where if COVID had hit, things would have just shut down. Everyone sort of learned how to adapt over the last couple of years. We've learned how to use things like Zoom and Teams, and become more prolific on TikTok and different social channels. So I actually don't think that is a downside. I think that means there's tremendous opportunity for all of the students who have, there's been a forcing mechanism to learn an entirely new set of skills that I think ultimately over time will be valuable in the marketplace as well. So I just look at it a little bit differently.
Definitely. So we got a few more questions to come in. So what is your favorite writing project that you've done?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't know if you mean this professionally or personally, so I'll answer it on a couple of different levels. So professionally, I think, just to pick from the last couple of years, I would say the work we've done around the company's purpose. So we worked to relaunch the Coca-Cola company's purpose, which is to refresh the world and make a difference. That had a lot of different elements. There was writing, there was creative, there was video, there was art. And so there was just a lot that went into that. And then personally, through the Hopkins program, I took a course on Michael Jackson. And so there was a great soundtrack, as you can imagine, but also there were a lot of fun writing assignments in that course. That was probably one of my favorites of late.
And there's another question. This may be tough, but I'll ask it. What does a typical day or week look like for you?
There are very few typical days or weeks in an organization like ours, because we're so global. And so as you can appreciate, as there are different world events and different things that happen, you get to connect with your colleagues all around the world. But I would say generally, if I could get to the typical parts, we have editorial meetings on Mondays with a whole group of people across the company, where we think about what are the messages, what are the key communications we need to get out, how do we make sure they don't all collide with each other on the same day and time. And so, I would say there's some planning elements through meetings like that, team meetings. I manage a team, so we have different meetings as a team. As a leader, I have a lot of one-to-one conversations with my team members, because as you kind of move through an organization, what you find is your, really part of the most important part of your job is helping your team be successful and your individuals on your team be successful. So a lot of my time is focused on people. And then I'll call it the X factor, the different things that come up in the world, or, that need communications, that we get to work on those as well.
And so 2 more questions. So this is kind of any kind of closing thoughts or any closing memories about CTY that maybe have come to mind, or as we talk, kind of you want to share, but just any closing thoughts around kind of CTY and the impact it's had on you.
Gosh, yes, there have been a flood of them the last couple of days. And so I think of them in a couple of pieces. One is the academic side. And so, I think Brian, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but my mom tells me that when I came back from CTY, one of the things I said was, it was like the first time I'd been around people that I could, as much as I loved my town and my community and my friends at home, there was something special about the connections and relatability of that we were able to share in the CTY experience. It really motivated me and gave me a lot of excitement about going into high school and going into these different courses. And so I think the academic piece, learning in the setting, it was the first time I learned from college professors in the classroom, and had my work critiqued by at a collegiate level. That was groundbreaking. And then on the friends side, I don't know if it's still the tradition, but the CTY dances, there is nothing like the CTY dances and American Pie playing at the end. And so, there was just a lot of fun throughout. We had talent shows, and of course, all the kids were really talented. So these were real talent shows. So there was just, a lot of really great memories. And the only thing I wish is that we might have had Facebook or Instagram back then, because I think we'd all be a bit more connected today than we are, but we can keep working at it to reconnect.
So here's the last question, and this is a serious one.
Okay.
If there was a movie created about your life, what actress would play you?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I'm going to go for dark hair. So I'm going to go with Penelope Cruz. How about that?
All right. Well, that'll work. That'll work. Well, Karyn, first, really, thank you so much for joining us and for this engaging conversation. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our attendees as well. Please visit the CTY Facebook events page, where we'll be posting upcoming events this summer and fall. As a reminder, when we adjourn momentarily, you'll be directed to the CTY YouTube page, where the recording of this webinar will be posted once available. Thank you all. Hope to see you again soon. Have an awesome summer, and please stay safe. Thank you.